How y'all doing tonight?
Good.
Just so you know, I knew it was a little chilly in the back. I turned up the heat just a little bit. I can do that from my chair. That's really cool.
Right?
Technology, isn't it? It's just awesome. So we're in the midst of a series, Naked Marriage. And I know there's some in here tonight that aren't married. Don't tune me out or leave, okay? Because if you have plans to maybe someday be married, this is great information. If you have no plans to be married, that's okay too, because you can use this and apply this information to relationships, other relationships, close relationships, and most importantly, your relationship with God. How many know that you have a covenant with God?
Sure.
How many of you know that the marriage covenant is just really a type, a shadow of that covenant that we have with God?
Sure. Yeah.
So the more you learn about that marriage covenant, which is what we're really talking about all through this series, the more you're going to learn about that covenant with God that you have, right? And so, just so we don't have anybody checking out on me, we're in the midst of a series, Naked Marriage. And this would seem like every guy's favorite series, right? However, in review, this may actually be some of the most uncomfortable material for most guys. Week 1, we defined having a naked marriage means committing to a relationship. This might be a long night. A relationship that is vulnerable and transparent. How many know that's not easy? It's not easy to have a relationship that's vulnerable and transparent, especially maybe if you've had times in your past when you have tried to be vulnerable with someone and they've basically stepped on those feelings. They've abused you in that sense when you reached out and were vulnerable. It puts up a guard and we don't want to do that again. But the only way to have the kind of naked marriage that you want, the kind that God desires for you, is to pursue that vulnerability, to pursue that transparency with one another. And last week, we discussed a step into the naked marriage is through naked communication. Being completely open and honest with each other with love. That doesn't mean, I'm going to be totally honest with you, Lori. You're ugly. Okay, that would not get you very far.
Get you killed. Yeah.
I'm just glad she's not here tonight. And I know it's being recorded, but she doesn't listen. I asked her. So, being completely open and honest with each other with love, building trust and intimacy. And when I say with love, that doesn't mean we sidestep the hard issues. It just means we're not stupid with our communication either. I wouldn't communicate with my wife anything that I wouldn't communicate with myself. Of course, I do call myself stupid sometimes, but I wouldn't do that to her. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's good.
Because that's really what it means is I would have the same respect. You know, and even honestly, if I can be truthful about the whole situation, you know, sometimes I find myself being more kind and considerate and tender as a pastor towards people that I come in contact with day after day than with my own family, with my wife, with my kids. I go home and let it all fly and not take into consideration feelings or anything else. It's easy to do, to get in that habit of doing, but that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about the kind of open, honest communication that deals with those hard things when you do feel a hurt or a mistrust or something between you and your spouse. You don't just push that underneath a rug and forget about it. You have to talk about that. You have to deal with that with an open mind, not just a defensive mind, not trying to get your way, but trying to understand each other. And when you both do that, it creates vulnerability, transparency. So this week, we're going to begin to discuss a topic that is inevitable in even the best marriages, fights. I am not going to ask how many people have had fights in their marriage because I'm not stupid in that case, okay? I think most of us have crossed this bridge at one time or another. So in this session, we want to discuss naked fights. Though I truly believe we can get to a place in our marriage where fights become very minimal, hardships happen. How we handle those hardships directly affects our relationship with our spouse. In fact, quoting the book, how we handle hardships, especially hardships we bring into the marriage because of our own unlovable flaws, believe me, I've got lots, determines the level of nakedness in our marriage. I think every marriage has a period where I call post-honeymoon. When we are dating, we tend to make every effort to put our best foot forward. When we're newly married, there is still the honeymoon phase where, again, we tend to work hard to keep the peace and diminish disagreements. And maybe even put up with a few nuances that drives you crazy, like shoes left all over the house. Oh, did I say that out loud? We also know that we need to communicate with our spouse, and for a while we do this well as well. But however, all this takes work. It's not always easy, is it? And after a while, when the new and shiny wears and fades, we tend to start feeling the daily grind of the work, and we get lazy. And that's when we can open the door to anger and frustration towards one another. Again, from the book, when we're going through a tough season, and we all will at some point, I'll get it right, we must resist the urge to face it alone, allowing resentment to take hold of our hearts. Sometimes it's just easier not to say anything sometimes when you feel like everything is going to be a fight, and so you just drift away. We need to go to our spouse and tell them what is on our mind and heart. Tell them everything, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and then ask them to do the same. When you both share, you will feel the weight lifted off your shoulders. The two of you are on the same team. You win together or lose together. You lean on one another through thick and thin. That's what your marriage commitment is all about, or should be about, right? Right? Okay, just making sure you didn't go to sleep on me. Your hard season may linger, but you can make it through when you face it together, hand in hand and heart to heart. Any kind of hardship can take a toll on your marriage. For example, financial strain. By the way, 80% of all marriages end in money fights. Stress at work, frequent travel with work, difficulty with kids, major illness, broken trust, moving, or problems with extended family. These are some common issues that cause husbands and wives to argue or pull away from one another. In the grand scheme of things, the struggles weren't major for Dave and me, and obviously I'm quoting the book, but the principles stay the same. You see, hard times are when we need each other the most. And it is essential to know how to bring peace to any marriage conflict. Have you ever felt like your marriage was stuck in a cycle of negativity? Have you ever had a season where you felt like your marriage was stuck, your relationship was stuck in a cycle of negativity? Okay, Dave and Ashley from The Naked Marriage, and that's where this series is coming from for those that may be joining us for the first time, call this the F5 marriage tornado. There are many factors to lead to this negative cycle, and I think we've got a picture of that up here that they can put up there in a minute. But there are many factors that lead to this negative cycle, which can be set into motion by stress, exhaustion, or miscommunication. How it starts isn't nearly as important as how to break out of it. Because if you allow the negative cycle to continue, it can devastate your marriage. I like to refer to this negative cycle as the F5 marriage tornado. There are 5 factors in the storm of marital conflict, and they all start with the letter F, hence the F5 reference. Each of these leads in a cycle to the next one on the list, and with each rotation, around all 5, the storm grows in ferocity. Maybe you're a visual learner like me. Okay, and I'm reading from the book, obviously. So take a look at this simple graphic. All right, I want to go over this graphic. I think back one. Do we have one? That's the peace plan. Is there a F5 tornado? Did I not get that right? It's in the graphic. Man, if I messed that up, I apologize, guys. Okay, I don't know if they can find it on the fly or not. But the marriage, the F5 frustration, okay, is really, it's different parts to it, okay? It's frustration that leads to false assumptions. Now, in my personal opinion, any kind of assumptions or most assumptions are probably not true. I have learned that from my personal experience with my own and or others, people's frustrations that I've observed, that most of the time when we assume something, we assume wrong. In fact, I learned a little acronym about assume that I'm not going to share here because my wife right now will be saying this, no, stop. It is true, but I won't say it here. But we can take false assumptions, thinking that the other person is thinking this or meant this by this, when literally your husband could just be that dumb. And oblivious to the fact that you needed his help at a certain point in time, and he completely walked away. You thought it was on purpose. He had no idea whatsoever you needed help. Believe me, I'm about as discerning as a stump. And when I hear my wife say, when I ask her, hey, honey, do you need any help? No. Okay. I take her at her word. How dare should I, right? But we can make these false assumptions, which leads to fighting. Because the next time I come in, how's your day, honey? After I've said no, right? Fine. Well, you don't have to get an attitude. Get an attitude! Quit your screaming. Do you see what happens? And now we got a full-on flight. And I want to fight. Which leads to fatigue. You get tired of fighting. You get tired of going through the same fights, the same issues, the same buttons being pushed. And that leads to fantasizing. Man, it'd be different if we could have a marriage like so-and-so. Or boy, if I was married to so-and-so, we wouldn't have these problems. She treats me a lot better. He treats me a lot better, and even my own husband does. We start to think of how things could be different with a different situation, which leads to frustration, and we keep going again and again until we're spinning around and around. That's the F5 marriage tornado. The flip side to the F5 marriage tornado is the F5 marriage peace plan. Now, the book refers to this as being a peace plan, but I kind of thought it's more like a peace treaty to the F5 tornado. In other words, I think this works best when both husband and wife agree to try to put this first and work hard on initiating when tough seasons come and frustration tries to set in, because you know what? You're always going to have frustrations. Always going to have frustrations. It's never going to be to this point. I used to always think with my life with God and my life and my marriage and my life with my kids, if I just get to this, life is going to be, success is going to happen. Only to find new problems and new frustrations, which led me to conquer them, thinking, okay, now if I just get to here. And do you see how that game played? And pretty soon fatigue sets in because you're going to always have frustrations. It's how we deal with those frustrations that's important. So with this plan, We got this one. The moment we feel frustration, choose to break the negative cycle that feeds itself and first choose forgiveness. Ephesians 4:32 says, instead, be kind to each other, tenderhearted, forgiving one another, just as God through Christ has forgiven you. Forgiveness sometimes is a process. Sometimes we have to choose to forgive every day, every hour, every minute, maybe even every second. Why do you say that? Because the devil, the enemy, is really good at bringing it all back up again. When you choose to forgive, you got the mindset, I'm just going to forgive them. And then something else comes up and you're thinking about it again and you're like, no, I got to choose to forgive them. I got to choose to forgive. You got to make that choice sometimes, several times daily, maybe at first. Right? And then it maybe get easier. Do you understand what I'm talking about? Are you smelling what I'm stepping in? Are you with me? Okay, I need some class participation. I'm not quite a yellow, but I still need that. So in the process of forgiveness, it also helps to fix our thoughts on the positive. Philippians chapter 4, verse 8 says, now, dear brothers and sisters, one final thing. Fix your thoughts on what is true and honorable and right and pure and lovely and admirable. Think about things that are excellent and worthy of praise. Fix your thoughts on the good, not the negative. If you're looking for flaws, you will find them. And not only will you find them, that will be all you will see. Most often than not, the thing that frustrates you the most about your spouse is actually the same thing you love the most, depending on the day. Come on, think about it just a minute. Some day it frustrates you. Other days, it's the hottest thing about them. I love my wife's snarkiness. We can laugh and joke. It creates a playfulness about her that makes her sexy. I'm just saying. However, that same sarcasm can drive me up a wall as well. Because I'm not that way. Those are the days I need to remember how sexy she is and how much I enjoyed that snarkiness in times past. I need to focus my thoughts on the positive. And if it's something you just really can't stand about them at all, then focus on all the things that you love. Right? I don't like the fact that she always leaves her shoes all over the house. Did I mention that already? That frustration occurred year 1 of our marriage. We are working now on year 30, 29 years this past June, so we're working on year 30. And guess what? She still leaves her shoes all over the house. And when I have found that does not go well. About year 2 or 3, actually. And it's worse when I trip over them on the way to the bathroom at night. And in year 2 and 3, we used to have tremendous fights over shoes. Year 29, now working on 30, I just don't have the effort anymore. It just isn't a big deal. As my wife says about the kids, you just got to pick your battles. And I've learned I'm not going to win this one. So if I want to win for me, I pick up the shoes. Problem solved. We're both happy. I throw them in her side of the closet. If I didn't get them in the right space, her problem. Fix your thoughts on the good, not the negative, because you will always find flaws. And the more and more we look, that is all we will see. Fix your thoughts. It's a choice. Fixing your thoughts on the positive should be a constant reminder to proceed to the next step that we find in our F5 Marriage Peace Treaty, which is to focus on God's promises. Remember that God is with you, and He is bigger than whatever struggle you're facing. His promises are true and can be trusted. Immerse yourself in God's Word, the Bible, and choose to trust that God is in control even when life is difficult. And life will be difficult. I always used to say, being a Christian and married life is not a bed of roses. And then I said, wait a minute, it is. But even rose bushes have thorns. And so there's going to be some thorns sometimes. And thorns hurt. And they're not fun. And it's difficult. But it's never your job to fix your spouse or change your spouse. I think I need to repeat that. It's never your job to fix your spouse or change your spouse. It's your job to love your spouse. And it's your job to trust God with the rest. Always remember, he is your best friend. Or should be. Trust that God knows what He's doing, and He is better at working problems out than you are all day, every day. And finally, our graph, what is the final one it says up there? Anybody, everybody? Find peace. This isn't something that you stumble onto, it's something you choose. How do you find peace? How do I find peace, Kevin? First of all, be a peacemaker. Being a peacemaker doesn't mean to push your buttons. It means to know when to choose the right words at the right time and knowing when to be quiet. Or maybe I should just say knowing when to shut up. That may be harsh and crude, but it's true. Right, Robert? James 3:18, and those who are peacemakers will plant seeds of peace and reap a harvest of righteousness. If we want righteousness, right living, we have to plant seeds of peace. We have to be a peacemaker. How do we find peace? We meet in the middle. Compromise helps meet needs without tension. Choosing to express God's love to one another by preferring each other. Make it a game. See who can prefer the other over the other. And when you both do it, it can get really fun. Choosing to express God's love to one another by preferring one another can give new life to your marriage. Galatians 5:22 and 23, but the Holy Spirit produces this kind of fruit in our lives: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. So meet in the middle. Exercise those gifts, those fruits towards your spouse, towards your best friend. How do you find peace? Let it go. And for some of you, those three words are very small, yet very, very difficult. And why do I say that with such passion? Because I am one of them. I grew up with the need to be right. My sister once said, every cow that had horns was a bull. And I would fight and fight and fight with her till I was blue in the face. Because, Lindsay, that is not true. But she was stubborn enough, she would not believe me. You believe me, don't you, Larry? Because it's true.
I'm with you, bro.
But the fact of the matter is, even though it's true, was it worth fighting about? And yet we can do the same thing with our wives, with our husbands, with our spouse. I have to be right. No, you don't. You can be right and let her be wrong. It's okay. Let it go. To find peace, sometimes you have to do something very hard for some personalities in the room, myself included, and let it go. 3 small words. but with a very, very big punch. Romans 14:19. So then let us pursue what makes for peace and for mutual upbuilding. I don't have to be right all the time. I can just know I'm right. Until I'm not, which does happen every once in a while. No, it happens more than I want to admit. We just had this conversation, Lindsay, didn't we? We did. I told her I had to say that I was, I think the words we used was I'm mistaken, or I was mistaken, or I was wrong. I was wrong. Okay, that was the phrase. And I think I told Pastor Larry and Lindsay were there, and I think I told them, I said, I have to say I was wrong about at least once a day on average. Because it's true. 1 Corinthians 13:4, but I'm not wrong about cows with horns. Just saying. Love is, I wished I would have learned that as a kid. Love is large and incredibly patient. Love is gentle and consistently kind to all. It refuses to be jealous when blessing comes to someone else. Love does not brag about one's achievements nor inflate its own importance. Love does not traffic in shame and disrespect nor selfishly seek its own honor. Love is not easily irritated or quick to take offense. Love joyfully celebrates honesty and finds no delight in what is wrong. Love is a safe place of shelter, for it never stops believing the best for others. Love never takes failure as defeat, for it never gives up. Love never stops loving. It extends beyond the gift of prophecy, which eventually fades away. It is more enduring than tongues, which will one day fall silent. Love remains long after words of knowledge are forgotten. Let it go. Choose love. Another way to find peace: release your anger. Ephesians 4:26, don't let the passion of your emotions lead you to sin. Don't let anger control you or be fuel for revenge, not for even a day. I love that from the Passion. I know there will be some that say, I can't help it, but the truth is, you can't. Anger is really a choice. Choose to release it and not dwell on it, act on it, push it down, or vomit it out. Release it. To find peace, control your tongue. The point of ugly words is to hurt someone else. And why would you want to hurt yourself? Because when we point our words at our spouse, at our very best friends, we are not only hurting someone else, we are hurting ourselves, because somewhere I read the two shall become one flesh. When we enter this marriage covenant, we become one. So why would we want to hurt ourselves? When we choose words that hurt our spouse, we in turn are hurting ourselves. Don't shoot yourself in the foot. Rather, think before we speak. Control your tongue, and don't let hateful words even escape your mouth. Ephesians 4:25, never let an ugly or hateful word come from your mouth, but instead let your words become beautiful gifts. I love that encourage others. Do this by speaking words of grace to help them. Sometimes this looks like personally escaping from a situation for the moment. This drives me crazy when my wife does this personally. But sometimes is exactly what my wife needs, because she too is angry with me in the moment. Though in hindsight, sometimes this is the very thing I also need to gain better perspective, to soften my own heart, to see things clearly, to see the fact that maybe I was wrong. It forces me to think and analyze instead of entering into defense mode or even what I think is right. It can help me gain the right perspective. If we jump down to verse 31, lay aside bitter words, temper tantrums, revenge, profanity, and insults. but instead be kind and affectionate toward one another. Has God graciously forgiven you? Then graciously forgive one another in the depths of Christ's love. In the perspective of that scripture, that looks so easy, so peaceful, so wonderful. But in the midst of frustration, it can look a lot different. When you're so mad at them, you could spit. This verse looks a lot different. But guess what? We should do the same thing. Even when maybe the mood isn't quite so Passion Translation-ish. Does that make sense? I mean, there's times when you don't want to forgive. There's times when you don't want to lay aside bitter words and tangents, revenge, profanity, insults. You don't want to be kind and affectionate when you really want to just rip their head off right now. Come on, that's reality, right? But that's the time we need to do it the most, is to remember you make a choice not to get angry before you're angry. You choose to be kind and affectionate when you really just want to. And sometimes that means walking out of the room, coming back when you've released that anger instead of vomiting it in their face at the time. Is this hitting anybody at all? In conclusion, I want to share with you something that I've learned as a facilitator for a program we've adopted here at Family Church for premarital guidance. And frankly, I've even used it in some cases for marriage counseling I thought the couple could really benefit from. It says this: a prideful spirit keeps us from cooperating, flexing, respecting, compromising, and resolving. Instead, it fuels defensiveness and discord. And they go on to say, we want to provide you with an exercise that you may want to use. It's called sharing withholds. It's designed to help manage conflict before it even starts. You see, the idea behind sharing withholds is this: every day in every marriage, we hold on to information our spouse doesn't know about. Not because we're secretive or private, but because we're traveling at the speed of life. This is an exercise that you can use to do with your husband or wife routinely on a weekly basis, and it takes just about 10 minutes or so. Here's how it works. Each of you write 2 things about your partner that they have done in the last 48 hours that they sincerely appreciated, or that you sincerely appreciated, but did not tell him or her. 2 things. For example, I appreciate the compliment you gave me as I got out of the car yesterday, or I appreciate the help you gave me in planning for my meeting this morning. And then finally, you write 1 thing that your partner has done. In the last 48 hours that irritated you, but you didn't say anything about. For example, I didn't like it when you borrowed my umbrella without telling me. I hate it when my wife takes something where I had it in this particular place and I knew it was there. It drives me crazy. Or I didn't like it when you said nothing about the meal I made for us yesterday. That's the one that I'd probably be guilty of right there. Once you've both written your statements out, the 2 positive, the one that irritated or negative, you take turns sharing them. One person shares all 3 statements, one after the other. The other person shares all three of their statements. And here's the important part of sharing withholds. The person on the receiving end can only say thank you after each statement. That's it. Just thank you. This rule allows you, couples, to share something that bugs you without fearing a blow up or a defensive reaction. Okay? And one more thing. Once you've shared all three withholds, the negative ones are off limits for 30 minutes. This allows you to gain a bit of objectivity by moving from reacting to responding. Doesn't mean you can't talk about them, you just can't for 30 minutes. It's a great exercise to not only handle confrontation in a way that's more constructive than destructive, but it's a great exercise to build trust, to build vulnerability, to build transparency, to move you closer to a naked marriage. So that's your homework assignment. And that's all I've got. 10:02 with a baptism tonight. 8:02. We have got to fix that clock. It says 10:02, okay? I know it's not right, and I should have known that before the words come out, but that's what you get when you talk before you think, which is exactly what I did. I hope this helped you. I hope it was beneficial for you. You don't want to miss next week, because we have talked about naked. We introduced naked marriage. We talked about naked is good. We talked about naked communication. Tonight we talked about naked fights. And what always comes after a fight? An apology, a kiss. Next week we talk about naked sex. Come on back. I know all the guys will. Thank you, guys. You're dismissed.